Today we are going to learn about some chords we learned in the first video, where we tried to harmonize a given melody with chords, which may give a jazz sound. So this is actually a very basic way of getting a very basic jazz sound. It's just a method to get a very basic jazz sound by way of harmony. This is not a video on learning to improvise on a jazz melody or a melody of a standard. This is a video where we are trying to reharmonize a melody with chords or with new harmonies. Yes, so we learned the basic steps in the first video. Today I will explain some of those chords used in that video. Right. The first one, as you can see, is C sixth. So what are the notes of C sixth? C sixth has C, E, G, A, C. C, E, G, A, and again there's an octave which is again C. So there are 5 notes in this: C, E, G, and A. And we can hear it in the video of this chord being played. Now the next chord is built on the chord D. Actually, there are D octaves here. We used D, F, G, B, and again D. So this is actually a G7 chord, but with D as the bass note. And of course, there's a D octave here. And in between, it has been harmonized with these other 3 notes. So this is a method of harmonizing the D octave. But now let's see the next chord. The next chord is also built inside the D octave. But it is actually a new chord which we may name as D diminished. So it has the notes D, F, A flat, B, and D. D, F, A flat, B, and D. This is D diminished. Again, it's built up inside the D octave. But now the inside notes are F, A flat, and B. Earlier it was F, G, and B. So this is actually a chromatic chord because the A flat note is outside of the scale of C on which we are building these chords. In the first video, I explained that we are building these chords on the C major scale. So you can see the first chord is C, D, E, F, and so on. Right? So today we are going to build only chords up to F. There are many more chords that can be built on these notes, but we are going to keep it to mainly a few types of chords, like the 6 chords, 7 chords with inversions, and the diminished chords, and again 6 chords with inversions. You can see the C6 is a chord built on the C root note, that is C6. The second chord is G7, the D bass note, which is actually a diatonic chord because it's built on the C scale. The first chord is also a diatonic chord, because it's built on the C scale. This third chord has an extra note, not an extra note, actually it's a note outside the C scale, and that is A flat. So we call it a chromatic chord because this A flat is not part of C, right? So the difference between diatonic chords and chromatic chords is diatonic chords are built on the notes of the scale, but chromatic chords have notes outside the scale. So D diminished is a chromatic chord because the note A flat is there. Now let's take the next chord. The next chord is actually C6 with an E bass note. So it has the notes E, G, A, C, and E. This is also a diatonic chord because it is built on the C major scale. E, G, A, C, E, and is built around this octave. E to E is an octave. E to E is an octave, and inside the octave we have these three notes G, A, C. So the name of the chord is C6 with an E bass note. Right. Now let's take the next chord, which is actually a chromatic chord. So this is a chromatic chord. This one is a chromatic chord. Why? Because there are two notes outside C or away from C, and the two notes are B flat and D flat. Now if you write the notes of the chord, you get E, G, B flat, D flat, and again E. So E to E is an octave. Okay. E, here this is the E next to C, middle C, and on top you have another E, an octave apart. Inside you get three more notes harmonizing this full chord. G, B flat, and D flat. So these three notes are notes that make this a chromatic chord because B flat and D flat are outside the C major scale. Next, the last chord we are going to study today is called F6. So F6 is built on an F octave. Of course, we don't need the last octave, but just to get that jazz sound, we are doing this reharmony within octaves. And this octave is actually part of the melody of the song. So what are the notes in this chord? F, A, C, D, and again F. We have the F octave. Inside we get three notes A, C, D. And this is a diatonic chord. because it has used only the notes of the C major scale, which we are using. Because the melody is based on the C major scale. So if we base only chords built on C major, using only the notes of C major, then that chord becomes a diatonic chord. So this is F6th. Of course, we don't need this last note to make it F6, but we need it to get the melody sounding like a jazz tune. When you harmonize the melody like this, it gets a jazzy sound, a jazz type of sound. It does not make it completely a jazz interpretation, but it helps to bring about a jazz sound. So this is one kind of method we are going to use in creating a jazz sound, to make a melody sound jazzy or jazz-like by reharmonizing. How do we reharmonize? How do we reharmonize? We take the melody and we double the melody in octaves, like this D to D, which belongs to the melody. E to E belongs to the melody, E to E, F to F, and so on. We double the melody, and inside this octave created, we add notes, creating various chords. So see, there are maybe many ways of harmonizing each melody note. Now, in this, for example, in this example, here D to D sounds like a G7 to the D bass note. But in this chord, the melody sounds like a D diminished chord. So the melody note has not changed, but the inside, the internal notes or the harmonizing notes, the harmony notes have changed. In fact, it has changed from a diatonic chord to a chromatic chord. So this is a diatonic chord. This is a chromatic chord. So this is one way of making or reharmonizing chords so that the melody sounds more jazzy or jazz sound, so that the melody sounds more like a jazz song. So I will see you in the next video, and there we will discuss more chords built on C major. Today we have discussed 6 chords, but next we will talk about more chords using the C major scale as a guide. Thank you.